Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, Greg Anthony here, and glad you are back on the Investigative Journal on this April 28th, 2017 day on our calendar. Now, if you turn on the mainstream news, you can't help but hear the rumblings of war on every news channel. We have North Korea threatening to nuke our cities. We have Iran fomenting terror throughout the world, including here. And it seems that on every front, we're getting poised for some big, huge conflict. And I've said this a long time ago, that wars are orchestrated. And isn't it interesting that throughout our history, we've been at war all but 20 years. So I say we are a warring nation. Today I want to call upon Walter Veith. I haven't played any of his presentations in a while. And he presented one called the Jesuits' Secret War Manual. Because my thinking is that if wars are orchestrated, who are the brains behind creating all of this? And I say you have to look at the Jesuits, that's all. Put it on the table. But it seems that we are caught up in double talk and hypocrisy in this country and do not want to deal with the true enemy within. And what I mean by that is today I woke up hearing that Pope Francis, of course he's a Jesuit, is now going to Egypt. And the reason he's going there is to console the Christians and to tell them that he's behind helping their persecution going on in the Middle East. And what double talk that is, because his organization is the one that provides the brains behind Christian persecution. But yet he goes there, supposedly to support them. That's what you have to deal with. And the mainstream media is playing it up on every station. The Pope is going to Egypt today to lend a hand. I'm telling you what, don't turn your back on him. That's all I say. So let's look at this. Before I play Walter Veith's Jesuit Secret War Manual, here's a quote from John F. Kennedy that gets overlooked. He said this, quote, "There's a plot in this country to enslave every man, woman, and child. Before I leave this high office and noble office, I intend to expose this plot." Kennedy said that. Of course, his presidency was cut short by the Jesuit knife, getting stabbed in the back, so to speak. Now, people say, well, Greg, how can this group of priests do all these things all over the world? Well, let's look at their organization. Let's go back and do a little history lesson here. The Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits, with their sun-worshipping logo, you got to look at that first, operate in the highest echelons of the Jesuit Illuminati. They're deeply involved in Freemasonry. I remember telling you this many times when I was working in Rome. A big, huge story broke on how over 150 cardinals and bishops were involved in Masonic lodges, which is basically, even according to their law, reason for excommunication. However, that never happened. And also, those stories never got over here. Of course, they got in the French and Italian newspapers, but nothing came here. And when you try to write something like that, it was never approved. And people say they don't control the media. Well, anyway, so they're deeply involved in these highest echelons of, let's just call it the Illuminati, or rather, their leaders do it for them as well. That's why they have all these leaders, world leaders. And I say this, right now we got this threat of North Korea, right? You can bet that the leader of North Korea and the leader of China and the leader of the United States all have a game plan. And they're playing it out. Now, somebody's got to orchestrate this. So who's got the most experience? I think it's the Jesuits and the Vatican, because they've been at it a long, long time. Let's look at this. So how do they work here? Well, you think of the Knights of Malta, the Knights Templars, the Knights of Columbus. That's just in the USA. and works closely with other secret orders of the church all over the world. Oh, we can throw in Opus Dei, which was created by the Jesuits. Now, the Society of Jesus has a long and sordid history of fomenting and orchestrating wars. And the creation of the Jesuits came with Ignatius Loyola, who was their first, they call him a general, for a good reason, the Jesuit general. It's a military organization formed to kill Protestants during the Protestant Reformation. Now, he was born, that's Loyola, at the castle of Loyola in Basque, a province in Spain, on Christmas Eve, 1491. He and a group of associates founded the Jesuit order in 1537, and it was given papal approval in 1540. From there, it expanded its influence throughout the entire world until it reached its present status as one of the most powerful secret organizations on earth, posing as Christians, posing as, they're always involved in everything. I've traced them to going to Russia during the Bolshevik Revolution. They went there with a check in hand. That was Father Edmund Walsh from Georgetown. In order to get to fund the Bolshevik Revolution, which was funded by Western money, as long as their boy, Joseph Stalin, became very influential in the Bolshevik Party, and later had Lenin killed. So anyway, they're all over the place. They were in there. If you look at everything going on, they're in Syria now. We've talked about their presence there, and a Father Dalloglio, who's there kind of as the overseer to make sure these ISIS warriors get their money. And if you go even to go to Afghanistan, they're there. You go to Iraq, even back in the 1930s, way back then. They were there during the overthrow and the installment of Saddam Hussein. It just goes on and on. This influence is now, it's a powerful society, so don't tell me it's not. When you start looking at what they've done, Loyola became the first Jesuit superior general, also known as the Father General, and he sent his agents far and wide to set up schools, colleges, and seminaries. The Jesuits now have some 17,000 members in 112 countries, and the worldwide structure consists of regions known as assistancies, which themselves are made up of provinces. So it's a well-oiled machine. Okay, as you can see, let me repeat that if you think they're not organized. They have over 17,000 members in 112 different countries. They're spread out all over the world. And the structure consists, it's well organized. I'm going to go through how it's consists of how they organize it here in America. But the Superior General has absolute authority and is again chosen for life until he decides to resign, and that's happened a lot lately. Now, people say, well, what's their goal? Let's boil it down to really what it's all about. They want to bring back total control to Rome, to the Roman Catholic Church and the papacy, using their minions in government, and they work together for what I call the Vatican-led New World Order, or one world order, one world religion. That's boiled down to their goal. Okay? And a good way to get that is to create chaos and war. Now, like I said, the Superior General has absolute authority. Okay? The Jesuit constitutions were written by Loyola and created a dictatorship that demanded absolute obedience to the Pope and the superiors with the order. So when I say that the President of the United States and many of the people that are working in this country, the hidden hand within, their allegiance is to the Pope, not to the Constitution of the United States. Now, what did Loyola say? He said the Jesuits should be like a well-disciplined corpse. Loyola produced a book called The Spiritual Exercises. It's kind of modern-day psychology. He did this in 1548, and it is still at the heart of Jesuit education. It tells Jesuits to suspend their own judgment, and the 13th rule says it is virtue to believe only what the Catholic Church tells them, even if it's not true. The example is given of seeing something that is obviously white, but believing it is really black, if the Catholic hierarchy says it is. On top of the Jesuit power structure stands the Superior General of the Order. Below him is the ex-Superior General, and there's two of them right now, I think, still alive. So we got three of them, then we got the Jesuit General and the Pope, who's a Jesuit. So they got all their bases covered, huh? Now, under him are 4 assistants of the Superior General, and 3 of these assistants are also regional assistants. Below these assistants, there are 7 regional assistants, and in total, there are 10 assistancies in this country. And I've contacted every one of them. And boy, do you get double talk when you start contacting them. Below him, there are 6 presidents of the conferences. And the list goes on. And I don't want to go through each of their names. But I always recommend, they're kind of like the hidden hand behind the scenes. People say, contact your congressman. I say, if you live in America, contact one of the assistancies. Now look at where they listen to this. You don't think they're all over the world? Regional assistant to South Asia. There's a regional assistant to Pacific Asia. There's a regional assistant to Latin American South. Regional assistants to Central and East Europe. Regional assistants to South Europe. Regional assistant West Europe. Regional assistants to South America North. Oh boy. President Conference of U.S. and Canada Provincials. As of 2016, it was Timothy Kaseki. President Conference of Southeast Asia Provincials. George Pattery. President Conference Pacific Agent. So they're not worldwide? Give me a break. Michael Lewis, he's the President Conference Africa and Madagascar. Wow. So they are a well-oiled machine, like I said. And basically, they're very good at orchestrating wars. So let's look at Walter Veith. I'm going to play this. It's a pretty long presentation, but I'll get most of it in, some of it in today. And I think you'll find it quite interesting. As he calls it, the Jesuit Secret War Manual. Okay.
What do people do if they go to war? They train, they prepare, and is it necessary for them to know what the enemy is doing? Well, imagine going to war having no clue who the enemy is or what he's doing. Wouldn't that be kind of silly? And yet, we are told we shouldn't dwell on these issues. All we need is the love of Jesus. And we need to preach the love of Jesus. And I agree. We have to preach the love of Jesus. But sometimes the love of Jesus is so buried under the rubbish of theology that nobody loves Jesus anymore. And they become atheists like me because Jesus is a monster who's going to boil everyone for all eternity in a place that he invented just for such an occasion, called hell. And these are all good theological summaries of the character of God. And so, if you go and preach to the outside world and you tell them Jesus loves you, is that going to convince a hardened atheist like the Dawkinses and the Hawkinses of this world? Is it going to convince them? No, they've already made their decision. But they made their decision based on false theology. They didn't make their decision based on the Bible. And the same when it comes to war. What do you do when you go to war? You plan, you strategize. And that's what we should also be doing. We must know the enemy, or the enemy will pull the wool over our eyes. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the enemy and how he thinks, because when you understand how he thinks, then you will be able to counter it and to survive the onslaught. Not, of course, without Jesus by your side. This one's called General Ricky's Wall. Now, who was General Ricky? General Ricky was the Jesuit general who ruled in the period just prior to 1798. We're going to cough a little bit, but just bear with me. General Ricky was supposedly a very soft-spoken, gentle little man. Anything but. A book appeared some years ago in that time period in French in the year 1772. And it was written by a French Jesuit named Jean-Joseph Marie Amiot. He was the astronomer to the Emperor of China. And this book was translated later into English, but only in 1905 did it really exist in the English language. And in 1910, another form of it was republished. But it was first published by a Jesuit who was the astronomer to the Emperor of China. So he spoke perfect Chinese and French. And the book is called The Art of War. Now, you've probably all heard of this book. But one other interesting point is the timing when it comes out, 1772. And on page 490 of his book, The Jesuits, Malachi Martin implies that if a Jesuit writes a book, then it is in essence the Jesuit general who sanctions it because of the oath of obedience. So no Jesuit will do anything without the marching orders of his general. Now, it's an amazing story. Most of you probably know it. Who's never heard of the Art of War book? Okay. How many of you know exactly what's in it because you've all read it? One or two. All right, so I better summarize it for you. If someone writes a book and he's a Jesuit, and he claims this is a true story, and he takes it from the legends, in actual fact, there's no evidence that there ever was such an individual as Sun Tzu, the general of this Chinese dynasty. Here you have an actual statue of Sun Tzu, the general, and the story goes that the Chinese king of Wu had a serious problem because he was being invaded by all the nations around, and the country was not coping, it was going under. And so a famous general by the name of Sun Tzu said to the king of Wu, if you had me as your general, I would get your army in such a ship-shaped state that you would defeat any other enemy that ever existed. And the king of Wu, some call him King Wu, said, that's impossible. My country is ragtag. It's chaotic. You'll never be able to do this. And the general calmly said to him, yes, I can. And so he said to him, all right, I make a deal with you. If you can take my concubine wives, and he had probably about 140 of them, and change them into an organized army within one day, then you will be my general. So Sun Tzu said to the king of Wu, who some call Hu, I will do it on one condition, and that is that I have absolute authority. So the king thought about it. He was in serious trouble. His nation was going down, and he said, okay, you have absolute authority. So he got the concubines together, and they were all giggling and laughing. This was going to be fun. And Sun Tzu said to them, right, you will now line up in two camps. One this side, half of you this side, half of you that side, and the two favorite concubines or wives of the king will be your leaders, so you will face them, and they will give you orders that come from me. And then you will do exactly what is being told. Except I won't speak to you directly, I'll use a drum. Now you all stand in a perfect line, and I'm going to explain it to you. When the drum beats once, you all smartly, in unison, turn to the right. If the drum beats twice, or something like that, then you will all smartly turn to the left. If the drum beats 3 times, you'll turn right round facing the other side. Stone-faced, nobody moves. That's military drill. That's how it will work. They thought it was very hilarious. All started giggling. And he says, right, let's start. And he beat the drum once. Boom. And they turned any which way. And he said, let's try that again. And he beat the drum twice, and it was total chaos. He said to them, ladies, I want you to pay careful attention. Perhaps you misunderstood me. I'll explain it one more time. And he carefully explained the drum beats to them. Do you all understand? Yes, they said, we all understand. Mirthy, mirthy, giggle, giggle. And he said, let's try that again. So he beat the drum once. And they turned any which way. And he did it another time and another time, and he explained it to them over and over and over, never losing his cool. And eventually he said, is there anybody here who does not understand the order? And they all agreed they understood. He said, fine. Then what we have is insubordination. That's high treason against the commanding officer of this unit. And the penalty for that is death. So the 2 leading ladies, the king's best concubines, his favorite wives, come here, you're going to be executed. So they ran to the king and they said, this guy's gone insane, he's going to execute your favorite wives. So the king sent a message and says, stop, 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 you're not allowed to execute my favorite wives. And he calmly said, I have absolute authority. And he took his sword and he chopped off their 2 heads. And then he said, fine, out of this group you come to the front and stand here, and out of that group you come to the front and stand here, you're taking their place. Now, let me explain it to you. If the drum beats once, you turn to the right. If the drum beats twice, you turn to the left. If it beats 3 times, you turn right round smartly. Everybody understand? Yes. No mirth, no giggling, just shock and horror. And the drum beat once. What do you think happened? It was the smartest right turn you had ever seen in any military. And the drum beat twice, and the drum beat 3 times, and there was total order. But the king was so devastated that he banned Sun Tzu. And then his kingdom started crumbling, and more chunks out of the kingdom disappeared, until the king in desperation said to Sun Tzu, all right, I capitulate. You can be the general of my forces. Same conditions? Yes. So, that's what they did. And eventually, Sun Tzu changed the picture and drove out the enemies and eventually totally obliterated every single enemy of the king of Wu.
Okay, I'm going to take a break right now. Take a 3-minute break here on the Investigative Journal, and we will be back with the Jesuits' Secret War Manual. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal. We're looking at the Jesuits' Secret War Manual, and this is Walter Veith giving a presentation on that. And one little tidbit before we get back to this, well, a couple things. Outside of when you listen to the mainstream, you're going to hear war, the drum beats of war all over the world right now. But you're also hearing this push for Trump has a new tax plan out, which lowers taxes for the middle class, and it also lowers the corporate tax from 35 to 15%. Now, people say, Greg, well, you say that the left and the right have this plan that they're working together, and they never really talk about the important issues. Well, taxes is an important one. Now, here's why. When you talk about income tax, they are always talking about America's overtaxed, etc., etc. But they never get to the real issue. And let me give them a little hint. The income tax has never been proven constitutional. It is an unconstitutional tax. How did the courts deal with it? Well, they didn't want to deal with it directly because they had no leg to stand on. It was like a two-legged chair. You sit in it and you fall over. So what did they do? Sneakily, they did a little sneaky lawyer trick. They made it voluntary without you knowing it. Yes, it's voluntary, and every year you can either pay it or you don't. But when you say that to someone, they look at you like you're crazy and basically listen to the government propaganda. Listen to the propaganda that the only two things in life that are certain are death and taxes. Well, certain taxes are constitutional, but let me tell you, the income tax isn't. Now, people are going to disagree with me, but go on and do some of your own research and email me at gregbeacon@gmail.com. Okay, and let's go back. Okay, this time in history is interesting. Now, everybody knows about the Sun Tzu Art of War book, and Walter's going over a good summary of it. And but no one knows that the Jesuits were the first to translate it into French in the 1700s, prior to the Revolutionary War, and then into English, what was it, 1905 or 1910? Now, the point in history, he was talking about Ricci, I call him Lorenzo Ricci, the Jesuit general. This point of history during the time of the Vatican and the Jesuits was quite interesting. Well, what even anti-Jesuits will tell you, and historians will tell you, that the Pope was upset with the Jesuits and disbanded them. And this was 17-something before the Revolutionary War. And then jailed Ricci, and he died in their prison right next to the Vatican. But then they were again resurrected in 1825 after the United States was up and running, right? Now, this part of history is interesting because I think we should put on the table that perhaps they used Sun Tzu's Art of War to make the American patriots feel that the enemy, because they felt the enemy were Jesuits in the Vatican back then for what they did in Europe. But if you put in the minds that your enemy is weak and in fact dead, the Jesuits were disbanded, then you have no worries. But then the enemy of the Jesuits can get away with more than if they came in with guns blazing, right? So there's a possibility, a strong possibility, that Ricci never was killed. He came over here, and there's evidence to say that he did, to help organize the Constitution and the war, etc., in order to usher in freedom of religion so the Vatican could get their dirty hands into this country, because back at that time there was only one diocese. Now look at what's happened. I just pointed out the organization of the Jesuits. That's just one small arm of the Vatican. Their holdings are immense. So anyway, let's get back to this interesting presentation by Walter Weith. Here we go.
And he became very famous. This is the legend of Sun Tzu. Now, this book was written by a French Jesuit, and it is probable that it is the blueprint of the Jesuit general's thinking. Because the King of Wu in this acronym is, of course, the Pope. And the papacy had lost one state after the other to Protestantism. And Protestantism was not only invading the mindset of Catholicism, but the various kingdoms were separating. England had totally separated. Jesuits were banned. They were nowhere allowed ever to put their foot into England. The Jesuits had tried to destroy the king and the parliament with the gunpowder plot, and it was under pain of death that they were there. Germany had thrown them out. The Dutch had thrown them out. The Czech Republic had thrown them out. So here he had a serious problem. And then he continued to say how a general acts. Now, if we have this knowledge, that a book written by the Jesuit has the sanction of the Jesuit general because it is the opinion and mind of the general, then we can learn from the strategy. Laying plans. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it would take too long. I'm just going to highlight a few points. All warfare is based on deception. That's the opening situation. All warfare is based on deception. Hence, when able to attack, he must seem unable. When using our forces, we must seem inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. When we are far away, we must make him believe we are near. Hold out bait to entice the enemy. Attack him when he is unprepared. Appear where you are not expected. Then he says, the general who wins a battle makes many calculations in his temple ere the battle is fought. Question. A normal general in an army, let's say the army of the United States, does he make his decisions in his temple? Or does he make them in his fort or his garrison or his whatever? This general is different because he makes his plans in a temple. That's a bit of a giveaway, don't you think? Hence, a wise general makes a point of foraging on the enemy. 1 cartload of the enemy's provisions is equivalent to 20 of one's own. So when you want to wage a war, the best way to wage a war is to use the enemy to wage the war for you. Think of countries in the world today where there is chaos and war, and the country is making war on the country within the war, etc. Okay? And likewise, a single pickle of his provender is equivalent to 20 from one's own store. Now, in order to kill the enemy, our men must be roused to anger, that there may be advantage from defeating the enemy. They must have their rewards. So you reward people that fight for you. The third point is attack by stratagem. Now, the general is the bulwark of the state. If the bulwark is complete at all points, the state will be strong. If the bulwark is defective, the state will be weak. Thus we may know that there are 5 essentials to victory. He will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight. He will win who knows how to handle both superior and inferior forces. He will win whose army is animated by the same spirit throughout all ranks. If he has prepared himself, he can win. And he will win who has military capacity and is not interfered with by the sovereign. So, general is on his own. He doesn't have to listen to Obama. If Obama says, do this, he says, sorry, I won't, etc. But he can listen to him if he wants to. And then the fourth, tactical disposition. The good fighters of old first put themselves beyond the possibility of defeat and then waited for an opportunity of defeating them. To secure ourselves against defeat lies in our own hands. But the opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself. His victories bring him neither reputation for wisdom nor credit for courage. Here's another giveaway. If a general in a regular army wins battles, doesn't he get accolades? Huh? Who doesn't know about General Montgomery today? Or who doesn't know about the famous generals of the last wars, or even the ones of the present? But this general gets no credit for his wisdom or his courage. This is a temple Jesuit. Sun Tzu said, the control of a large force is the same principle as the control of a few men. It is merely a question of dividing up their numbers. All right, now if you are supposed to use the enemy to fight against the enemy, what's the best strategy to do with the enemy? Divide up his numbers. Now, who was the enemy to Rome? Protestantism. What is the most divided organization on the planet today? Protestantism. Instead of one denomination of Protestants adhering to the Bible, there are 33,000 at least. 33,000. All at loggerheads with one another. Sun Tzu said, whoever is first in the field and waits the coming of the enemy will be fresh for the fight. You have to be the first in the field. You have to pull the strings behind the scenes, but they mustn't know it. They must think they are in control. So it's very important to be first in the field. So if you're going to set up a government system that is supposed to be at your disposal, but it's in the enemy's field because one cartload of theirs is worth 20 of your own, then it would be wise if you were in the field when you are planning such a strategy. Okay. And then he says, oh, divine art of subtlety and secrecy. Now that's a very strange divine art, because Jesus said, I have done nothing in secret. That's what Jesus said. If you want to know what I said, ask any of these. That's why I like saying, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. You know, in the old days, nobody said that. Everybody said, well, you know, yeah. No, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. I'm proud of being a Seventh-day Adventist. And I want to be a Seventh-day Adventist. And I want to defend our doctrine against anyone. I'll do it in a public forum. I'll get a hall, I'll get a tent. Anybody can come and listen. Doesn't matter. Why? Because we can defend what we believe from the Bible. There's nothing to be ashamed of. We do nothing in secret. Nothing. Doesn't have to be secret. But this general, divine art of subtlety and secrecy. Maneuvering. Sun Tzu says, in war, the general receives the commands from the sovereign. Let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night. And when you fall, when you move, fall like a thunderbolt. Boom. And then he says something very strange, variation in tactics. He says there are roads which must not be followed, etc., and commands of the sovereign which must not be obeyed. Now, this is very confusing to some people, because they hear the Pope making a statement, and they see the soldier doing exactly the opposite. For example, you will have the papacy officially declare that contraception is from the evil one. And the Pope will say, no contraception. And the Jesuits will hand out contraceptives in schools, in a school program. And you're going, excuse me, what's going on here? This is strategy. It's planned strategy. The army on the march. If soldiers are punished before they have grown attached to you, they will not prove submissive. Therefore, soldiers must be treated in first instance with humanity, but kept under control by means of iron discipline. A Jesuit swears to be perinde cadaver, like a corpse, in obedience. And even if a dog is given you as a general, Loyola said, you will not hesitate to obey him. And if he says it's black and you think it's white, you better believe it's black. Terrain. If fighting is sure to result in victory, then you must fight, even though the ruler forbid it. If fighting will not result in victory, then you must not fight, even at the ruler's bidding. So who has the higher position when it comes to control? The general or the king? The general. The general is absolute in his authority. Absolute. The 9 situations, I'm not going to read them all. I'm just going to highlight these few. It is the business of a general to be quiet and thus ensure secrecy. He must be able to mystify his officers and men by false reports and appearances, and thus keep them in total ignorance. In other words, does a Jesuit foot soldier necessarily understand the whole plot? No. In fact, he's fed misinformation in order that he does not understand the whole plot. But whatever order he gives, when the drum beats once, he does what? He turns to the right. And sharply. And he might not understand the picture, but this is it. He's going to do it. When fire breaks out in an inside of an enemy's camp, respond at once with an attack from outside. So if you see there's a fire burning and they're in trouble, that's when you hit them the hardest. And then he talks about spies. When these 5 kinds of spies, he says you need 5 kinds of spies. You need local spies, inward spies, converted spies, doomed spies, and surviving spies. This is incredible. So, these 5 spies you need. None can discover the secret if you have these 5 spies in a system. This is called divine manipulation of the threads. Constantly this general is bringing God into the picture, and this God that he is quoting is a very deceptive God. Would you agree? So it cannot be the God of the Bible, right? And then he says, let's have a look at local spies, means employing the services of inhabitants of a district. So there will be spies. If there are any spies here this evening, good evening. Then having inward spies is making use of officials of the enemy. Having converted spies, getting hold of the enemy's spies and using them for your own purposes. Doomed spies. Doing certain things openly for purposes of deception. And allowing our spies to know of them and report them to the enemy. That's mean. So you'd say to some of your people, I want you to do this. The drum beats, boom, you're going to do it. But it's a deception. And it's something that will rile the country where you are doing this, make them angry. Then you use your other agent to go to the ruler and say, I know who did it. It was them. Then it's your own people. And then they will be arrested and possibly executed. They're doomed spies. They're going to die. But they're your own people. You're going to kill them. What does that achieve for the general? That the ruler now has absolute trust in the spy that told him. And therefore you have an inside angle that you never had before. So sometimes it appears as if the Jesuits are in 2 camps opposing each other and fighting each other, and one of them may be a doomed spy and the other one might be a spy that tells the generals about him. Okay? And then you need surviving spies. Finally, are those who bring back news from the enemy's camp. Hence it is that with none of the whole army are more intimate relations to be maintained than with spies. None should be more liberally rewarded, and no other business should have greater secrecy in order to be preserved. The enemy spies who have come to spy on us must be sought out, tempted with bribes, led away and comfortably housed. Thus they will become converted spies and available for our services. Now, did you know that this book is compulsory reading for the military in this country? Now, with this knowledge in our minds, and we're thinking about the year 1798, the period leading up to it, and the period following. Now, does the devil know the Bible, yes or no? Okay. If Wesley could figure out that the first beast of Revelation 13 was the papacy, if Martin Luther could figure that out, if Melanchthon could figure that out, if Cranmer could figure that out, if Ridley could figure that out, then surely the devil had it figured out long before them, right? And if Wesley could figure out that the second beast of Revelation chapter 13 was about to appear because it was the end of the 1,260-day period, then surely the devil knows that too. Because he knows God's plan, and his plan is to subvert. So if he knows this is going to happen, is he going to try to be in the field first, yes or no? Because he wins, who is there? First. Now the Bible tells us that the second beast will deceive the whole world by making fire come down from heaven, deceiving all the people. And this fire cannot be literal fire, because literal fire is anything but deception. It just kills people. Deception must be something else. So this is a form of religion that will emanate eventually out of this chaos, which will enable the first beast to make the second beast do its bidding. So in other words, it must be able to pull the strings in order to do that. So the first thing you do is, what's the problem with the upcoming nation? Well, it's a Protestant nation. It's a Protestant nation. And the upcoming nation is subject to the King of England and the British Parliament, which had banned the Jesuits and Catholicism out of the realm under pain of death. So we have to avoid that. We have to avoid a nation adopting a constitution as the British have, because that would ban Catholicism and expose it for what it is. So we need something else. We need a constitutional system which will guarantee that the Jesuits can never be thrown out. Constitution which lays no claim on religious convictions. That must include them. So that's the first point. Okay?
Okay, I wish I had more time, and you know the Constitution that Walter was talking about is right here in the United States. Well, have a good weekend. We'll get back to this next week. Have a good weekend, and see you next Monday on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.